Hey everyone, as promised, told you that I would complete the video that shows you how to make your graphs in Excel and all the things that you need to do to your graph to make it what it's looking like, or what it's supposed to look like. So, first thing you need to do, open up Excel. Like I said in class, I mentioned in class that pretty much any computer is going to have some kind of a graphing program on it, whether you use a Mac or whatever it is. It may not look exactly the same as Excel, obviously, but it's all going to be able to do the same thing. So the first thing you need to do before you make your graph is to put in the values or the measurements that you want to make the graph of. So like I said in class, the first thing you measured was volume, and the second thing you measured was mass, so we put those in two separate columns. I know from the measurements that you guys took in class and the information that you had to work with, the measuring tools that you had to work with, that your volume values should go to the tenths place because they had the ones place marked on the cylinder, and that your uncertain digit then takes you one place past that. So let's say that the first one you took and the volume of it was 3.1, not 3.10, 3.1, and then the next one was, let's say, 6.0. Excel will get rid of that 6, that's fine, or the 0, it will get rid of the 0 that you put in. That's okay for now. It's an important part of your measurement, but it's not really important for what Excel is going to do. So then, let's say 9.2, then let's say we go 11.9, and then we'll go 15.0. So those are the three, or we'll go one more, sorry. Let's go 17.8. So those are the 6 volume measurements that you took. And then let's say your masses, and again, I know from the measurement tool that you had to work with that your masses should go to the hundredths place. So let's say that the mass of this one was, let's say, I don't know, 3.01. This one, 5.99. This one, 8.89. This one, 12.06. This one, 15.10. And this one, 18.07. Okay? I'm just making those numbers off the top of my head, right? You guys put in whatever your numbers were for your measurements, and we go from there. All right, now that all the data is in there, we have to actually make the graph out of it. So the first thing you have to do, one thing. When you are putting data into Excel, you do not have to put units on these values. If you put numbers and letters in the same square, Excel doesn't know what to do with it. So just keep it as the numbers because that's what Excel needs for you to put. And again, don't worry so much about if it gets rid of zeros. That's fine. It doesn't affect how Excel graphs it. You need those zeros because they're important parts of your measurement, but not really for Excel making the graph. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to highlight these 12 squares, the ones that I want to make the graph out of. And then I'm going to go up to the top and hit the Insert tab. And you can see the banner up at the top changes. But in the middle, you see that there's one called Charts. This looks a little different on this version of Excel. In the previous version, it had individual tabs or individual buttons for all the different kinds of charts. The one we want to make is this one called the Scatter X, Y. You're not making a line graph out of these numbers. A line graph will plot column A and column B separately as two different lines. The scatter graph plots column A versus column B, and that's what we want. So if you click this button, it gives you a bunch of different options. We don't play connect the dots, so we don't want this one. We want this one that just shows the line, just shows the data points that we have on our data table. So if I click that, it makes the chart automatically for me. There it is. Now, when automatically the lines show up, and then up at the top it gives you a generic chart title. So you can go in here and you can change the chart title to something descriptive. For instance, here we measured volume versus mass for dice, which is what we actually measured. Okay, that's great, but that's not the end of our chart or our graph. It needs a lot more things. So if we click back here on the outside, these 3 tabs show up on the outside. You got the plus sign, which adds chart elements. that's the one that we're going to really go with. If you click it, you'll see that it has a bunch of things that could go on your chart, okay? Some of them are checked and some of them aren't yet. First, we want to click axis titles because we need to know what's showing up on our axis. And when you do that, right, axis title, the generic terms show up. By default, Excel always puts what's in the first column on the x-axis and what's in the second column on the y-axis. So, where it says axis title here, because volume was in our first column, that means that volume will show up on the x-axis. Don't forget to include a unit. You were measuring volumes in milliliters. Okay? Excel puts by default whatever was on in the second column on the y-axis. You had mass in your second column. So we'll call this one mass. Mass you measured in grams. So that gives us our axis titles. Last thing, so I'll click over here just off the chart a little bit and get the 3 tabs on the side again. Plus, if I click that, one of the ones down at the bottom is trend line. Now, if you hit the little arrow on the side here, right, it will give you different options for the kinds of trend lines. Excel calls trend lines, they're what we sometimes refer to in class as best fit lines. Remember, it's there to show us the trends in the data, to show us the patterns. I am going to click the one that says more options. And when that happens, over here on the side, you get the format trend line option. There we go. This one on the side, trend line options. This graph is pretty straight, and the numbers that you should have graphed in class should have come up pretty straight as well. So over here on the side, it gives you all kinds of options about what kind of best fit lines it can put in. It's not always a straight line. A lot of times it is, but sometimes it isn't. So, but here, we're going to keep this one as linear. But more importantly, in this little section right here, on this one on the right that says trendline options, if you come down to the bottom, you'll see there's a box here that says display equation on chart. And when you display that equation, like it says, an equation for the dotted blue line that Excel drew shows up in that or on the graph. That's going to be important for answering questions on this graph in particular, or on this lab in particular, because some of the questions on the back relate to this equation. And I'm not going to tell you too much because I want you to try and figure it out. All right, once we've made our graph, so we click on our graph somewhere, we have the 3 tabs. If we come up here to File, and then we go to Print, you should see just the graph itself, which is really what we want. That's all we want right now as far as the graph. Oh, some of you might be asking. If we go back to the trend line, we go back to trend line options here, okay? In this section where it says forecast, we can make the trend line go backwards or forwards as much as we want to. Some of you might be annoyed that the trend line doesn't start at the beginning, so all I'm going to do here is I'm going to forecast backwards 3 periods because I started at about 3 on the x-axis, so that should take me back to 0, right? And now it kind of goes back here pretty much at the beginning, right? It goes, Excel kind of made it go show you here below the x-axis. That's fine. Whatever. All right, so File, Print, there's your graph with your trend line on it, your equation for your trend line. That's what you want. Last thing, and this is just more of a logistical thing, right? If you go to this one here that says Page Setup, one of your tabs here on Page Setup is Header Footer. You might want to put your name on it so it doesn't get lost from your paper or whatever. So if you go to Header Footer, right, if you go Custom Header, you can type in your name here, or on the left, or on the right. I really don't care where that one goes. And you hit OK again, and name shows up here, and you're ready to print. So that's how you make an Excel graph of the data that you measured in class. You're going to need that trend line, and especially the equation for that trend line, in order to answer questions related to the lab that we did last week.